If you're a beginner or if you've been mixing for a while, reaching for a compressor plugin is always fun in Presonus Studio One, but did you know that there are a couple of settings that you need to be aware of because these can easily make it or break it when it comes to you having a good mix. In today's example, we're continuing in a series of videos that I've been doing on how to mix drums in Presonus Studio One. The first video, we started off just by gating some of our drum tracks that were recorded here in this room. Then we did a video on EQing the drums that you can watch at your own convenience. And that's where we left off in today's video because today is all about the compressor. So let's jump into Presonus Studio One and load up some compression plugins. Now, what does a compressor plugin actually do? Well, in the short version of it, a compressor plugin is going to limit the dynamic range of the information it's being given. Anything that's too loud will be made quieter, and things that are quieter can be made louder. And we can apply compression on any track that we want to. These can work on acoustic guitar, vocals, keyboards, saxophones, and in today's video, drums, for example. So to add the compressor plugin, make sure you have the mix window open, and I've got my kick drum track selected. I'm gonna go up here where it says Inserts. I'm gonna click the plus button and scroll down to my Presonus plugin folder. Then there is a plugin called Compressor. This is the stock built-in compressor in Presonus Studio One. And in today's video, we're gonna be reaching for some presets because believe it or not, even though you load a preset, that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the most out of the compression. And that's where I get the title for this video, Make or Break Settings for Compression, because I'll show you a couple of them you need to be aware of. So to add any sort of preset, like on the kick drum, I go up where it says Default, and I click this drop-down menu. I go to the drums folder. All of these presets should be available to you. This is the professional version of Presonus Studio One. If you have the artist version, I'm fairly confident it's gonna have these presets as well. BD stands for bass drum, so I often call it a kick drum. They're saying bass drum, that's totally fine. And BD's got metal, rock, smooth, not sure what that is, tight, and funk. These are really just going to be changing the settings of the compressor for us, and they're usually based on genres of music. I tend to think that a metal kick drum is going to emphasize more of the attack on the kick drum. So if you have a kick drum that's meant to have a lot of that clicky sound that you get from metal drums, that would be fine. Rock is going to be more of a generic kick drum sound, but I really like the one that's called tight. So let's go ahead and click that. And as soon as I do, all these parameters have now changed on the plugin. So if I hit the space bar with the kick drum track solo, just hit S, and then hit space bar where the kick drum is being played, take a listen. And here it is with the compressor off. Now, one of the things you've noticed, and this is where I get the break it segment from, is there's no change in what you're hearing. Why didn't it change? When I have the compressor plugin on, why does it not sound any different? Well, that's actually because if you don't change the threshold setting, none of these presets are going to be doing what they need to do. So the threshold parameter is up here at the top left. So even though it's already got a ratio set, it's got the attack time set, a release time set, I have to bring down the threshold knob so that I'm getting some sort of gain reduction. How much gain reduction or how much the compressor is actually working is going to be visible when you see a yellow bar going down. So I'm going to hit play, and as the kick drum is playing, I'm going to turn down this threshold knob until we see about 3 to 6 decibels of gain reduction. Now you can see that yellow bar. I'm going to hit play again, right where I've got my mouse hovering. I want you to look at how much gain reduction is actually happening. Now, on this preset, over where it says makeup, it has an auto function. So if I click this auto, I've now turned auto off. Auto function can be really helpful if you're kind of one of these, like you just want to set it and forget it, or you just want some assistance, but it makes me a little bit concerned. I like knowing how much compression I'm getting overall from the drums or whatever setting I've got loaded in Presonus Studio One, but the makeup gain, I want it to be consistent. So every time the kick drum is being compressed, theoretically, the makeup gain set to auto is going to adjust. So if it's compressing the kick drum by 3 decibels, you would think that the makeup gain would automatically add 3 decibels of volume. If I turn the makeup gain down all the way, so auto is off, makeup gain is all the way off, but we're still compressing the drums. Let's take a listen to what the drums sound like with compression and then without. Here it is without. It sounds a lot louder with the compressor off. That's because when it comes to compression, the 2 settings that are going to make it or break it with your compressor is the threshold, making sure you bring that threshold down so you're actually doing compression. And then at the output, your makeup gain of the compressor plugin, you need the makeup gain to be consistent with how much you're getting gain reduction. So if my kick drum is being reduced by 6 to 9 decibels of gain, if it's being compressed 6 to 8, 6 to 9, I need to add in the makeup gain section, I need to add at least 6 or 7 decibels of gain. So I'm gonna go ahead and click this here and I'm gonna type in 8. Let's just go with 8. Let's just say I'm anti-AI or whatever, and I don't trust the auto function on makeup gain. Well, I'm gonna set it to 8. I'm gonna turn off the compressor. I'm gonna listen to how loud it is. I'm gonna turn on the compressor, and I theoretically wanna hear no change in volume, okay? So here it is without. Here it is with. Now it does sound like it's getting a smidge bit louder, so I'm gonna knock this down to 7, but those are the 2 settings I want you to keep in mind as you're adding compression to acoustic guitar, vocals. You need to watch the yellow gain reduction meter. You need to know how much you're actually compressing the signal, and then you need to make up for that in the makeup setting. You can totally use the auto function if you'd like. But let's move on from kick drum. I'm gonna drag and drop this compressor over to my snare drum track, and let's load up a snare drum setting under the presets. SD is gonna be snare drum. We've got snare drum bottom. I don't have a microphone under my snare drum. I don't record the snare drum bottom. It's got snare drum crack, so maybe that's going to emphasize a lot of the attack. Snare drum hard, snap, soft, tight, and top. Let's just go with snare drum top and see what that gets us. Again, I've just loaded this snare drum preset, so the first thing I need to do is adjust the snare drum's compressor threshold so that we're getting, again, about 6 to 9 decibels or 3 to 6 decibels of compression if you want to go light. All right, let's get a loop region here where we're hitting the snare drum, and let's hit the play button. As the snare drum's playing, I want to look at the gain reduction meter on the compressor, and I'm going to adjust the threshold so that we're getting that 3 to 6 decibels of reduction at least. So here's the snare drum compressor off. Here it is on. I can definitely hear it is doing some work on that. I like using the presets, especially if you're new to compression. It'll kind of give you an idea that when you do load a preset, take the time to look over at the attack and release settings so that you have some sort of judgment going from instrument to instrument. You start to pick up on some of the vocabulary of, okay, snare drum, I'm gonna set the attack time to 84 milliseconds or 80. Just having a general idea of what you would set the attack and release times to is gonna be helpful. I do like using this preset on the snare drum. It does sound good. It sounds like it's cleaning up my drum tracks, because whenever you have too much dynamic change in the snare drum, for instance, it sounds inconsistent and it can sound a little bit too indie. I want this to sound polished, I want it to sound radio ready, and I want it to tame a lot of the harshness you're gonna get from loud snare drums. When a snare drum hits, when a stick hits a snare drum, it is one of the most transient instruments that you can record. By transient, I mean it is very pokey. If you look at the waveforms on a snare drum, these are very short spikes that seem to happen and then they go away very quickly. When you add compression to a snare drum, you can ring in some of that dynamic range of the snare drum, but you're also adding some girth to the snare drum as well. Now, as far as compression goes, I'm not gonna mess too much more with compressions other than maybe the room mic. So I'm gonna drag and drop the snare drum compressor all the way to the room mic. Let's take a look through our presets again. Now the room mic is actually this large diaphragm condenser I've got here next to me. I'm in a very small room, but when you compress a room track, it really brings up a lot of excitement and ambience to it as well. I don't know if they necessarily have a room setting for all of this, but I'm gonna go with what they have set up for overhead jazz. Let's see what that's got going for it. I'll solo the room mic. So here's the room mic with the compressor. I'll adjust the threshold so we're getting our proper amount of gain reduction. That sounds pretty good. I'm gonna turn off the auto setting. I'm gonna set it to more of maybe 4 or 5 decibels of makeup gain. Let's hear it before the compressor. With the compressor. You can tell that compressor is working a lot more, but let's listen to it now in context of the rest of the drum mix. So here are my drums now. I've got compression on the kick drum, the snare drum, and the room mic. Let's take a listen to the whole thing, and we'll got one more setting I want to show you before this video is over. All right, there's one more thing I want to do, and as you can see, I've got all of my drums going to what's called the drums bus. The bus was simply created by highlighting all of these drum tracks, right-clicking, add bus for selected channels, and I've renamed this one drums. Now, if I add a compressor plugin to my drums bus, it's going to compress all of my drums together. So I'll click the plus button on the drums bus, scroll down to Presonus Studio One, we'll load the compressor plugin. Let's go through the drums presets. There is many drums bus presets available on the compressor. We've got generic, hard, live, smooth, and tight. Let's go with generic and see what it does from there. I'm gonna do the same thing that I've done for the others. I wanna make sure the threshold is being adjusted and the makeup gain is properly set. Here we go. Here it is without the compressor. Here it is with. All right, one of the things I'm gonna do just as I'm listening, it sounds like we're getting a lot of the room mic, and that could be because we've added compression to the room channel, but I'm gonna turn this room mic all the way down, and I'm gonna start to blend it in as all of the drum tracks are playing until I can just barely hear the room mic is contributing to the overall sound. Because right now it sounds really reverberant. It sounds like I'm getting a lot of the room mic and not a lot of the close mics. So let's blend that in. All right, that sounds good to me. Now we've got one more video I'm gonna show you, and that's specifically on adding distortion and effects to your drum tracks, because we're not done mixing the drums just yet. I wanna thank you so much for watching this video. In the meantime, hit the like and subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next video as it uploads. I'll thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.